Welcome to Crowning Around, where every woman wears a crown, whether she's 17 or 70. I'm Joan Caliendo, and this is the space where magic happens when women empower women. Each week, we'll dig into topics like ageism, stepping into your power, and everything in between. And today, we're kicking it all off with a queen in her own right. Me, Ms. New York Senior America. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 24, which I'm calling Kings County. So for those of you who know, that's a reference to the dear old neighborhood that I come from, which is Brooklyn, New York. Educated in Queens, but born and bred in Brooklyn. So tonight's episode 24, is actually a love letter to where I was brought up, and where my guest this evening, Miss Maria LaPlaca Borra, also was born and bred. If you don't see her here, it's because unfortunately she was not able to attend tonight's airing because of a death in the family. And as we do here, we pivot. So we're going to continue with the show and the premise and advertising her book, which is a wonderful expression of growing up in old Brooklyn. And we're going to pivot and we're going to move on to a surprise guest a little bit later on in the show. So let me begin by saying, if you're seeing me in orange and blue, it is because I promised and begged and prayed that we would somehow be able to be experiencing a Knicks victory today. And of course, that is exactly what happened. So if you did not watch the finals, you missed the greatest basketball that has ever been seen anywhere at any time, not the 53-year drought that we experienced. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the greatest basketball experience with, double-digit deficits and great comebacks and buzzer beaters. And listen, this is what I have to say. I've been around sports my entire life. I have to say that the Knicks reminded us all of who we are as people and fans and what we are made of, because the way that they won really embodies everything about New York. Gritty, determined, hard workers. And those 5 starters were some class acts, if you've seen them on any of the talk shows. And of course, the parade, the epic parade that took some 10,000 New York City police officers to manage over 1.5 million spectators. So good for you, New York, and good for you, Knicks. And thank you, because you gave us all a spirit and a happiness that we were lacking a little. And it's been a long time, and we appreciate that. So I also want to say happy Father's Day to those who celebrated on Sunday. We can't forget the men of which we have been shaped from. And of course, Maria and I, 2 daughters of Brooklyn, remember fondly the people who had a very, very big influence on our lives and ultimately our careers. For Maria, it was her Uncle Frankie. If we could put up the picture of Maria and her Uncle Frankie. This is the gentleman who inspired her to write a book.
Oh, hold on.
And also to go on and further her education and become a school teacher. So there's Maria and her Uncle Frankie. And ironically, the person who is my greatest mentor, it was also a teacher. And that was my father, Frank Morgello. We'll be looking at him later in some other pictures when we talk about baseball, his favorite passion. So thank you, Knicks. Thank you, fathers everywhere, for all of the things that you do and have always done for us. We appreciate it. So I wanted Maria to come on the show this evening because it was just a very unexpected way in which we met. My dear friend Linda Keller, who is a fellow Pickler, said to me, everybody here is from Long Island, but we very rarely talk about where we started. And my dear friend Maria is from Brooklyn, and she wrote a book entitled Sophia's Story, the 18th Street. I don't want to say edition, but the legend of what was it like to sit on the stoop in Brooklyn on 18th Street. And she said, I think you would really, really like Maria. I said, let's go to lunch. And not only did we go to lunch, but Linda gifted me the book, which I'm displaying here prominently. And after I read it, I said, I know I'm going to be instant friends with her because it is such a nostalgic memory of going back to the old neighborhood where Sundays meant families came together and the smell of sauce started at 9 o'clock in the morning. And some may call it gravy. You can debate that amongst yourselves because it cooked for over 3 or 4 hours, including the braciole and the sausage and the pork meat that went into it. And of course, children growing up in that neighborhood were taught to go to the local stores to get a loaf of bread or some fresh mozzarella or some pecorino romano cheese. And of course, the whole celebration was built around a dining room table with some folding chairs where people sat together and told stories and ate well and laughed. Now, Maria would explain that she moved out to Long Island when she was a young girl. I did not. I remained there throughout high school and college. But what she said to me resonated, that she said every Sunday, no matter what, no matter where they lived or how far they were or what the traffic was like on the Bell Parkway, they were going to go to her grandmother's house and have Sunday dinner. And that too was a ritual for my family. No matter who got married and moved away and had babies, and babies had illnesses, we all came together on a Sunday, of course, in the basement because we had 2 kitchens. That's the norm. And my grandmother would be down there cooking away and turning out, as Sebastian Maniscalco will say, trays and trays of lasagna automatically. But it was her pleasure and it was her joy to feed us all. And the stories that went on and on, mostly begun by my father, who was quite the humorist, are the things that made us who we are today. Every now and again, a good slideshow would come through. I'm talking legit slides on a carousel where we watched, my Uncle Alan put up pictures of us when we were babies. And if it wasn't for him taking photographs, we would have none because nobody took all of those photographs the way we do today. So it was really a celebration, and Maria encapsulated that in her book. I also believe that because she was the child who wanted to sit on the stoop and listen to her Uncle Frankie and all of the stories that he could share with them, she became a great listener. She became a lifelong learner. And that path, of course, took her into the field of education, which is something that I share with her as well. She eventually became a remedial reading specialist and an adjunct professor. And she said, no matter what, her Uncle Frankie would continue to tell her, it's time for you to write a book about these experiences and get this published and share your experiences with other children, which is exactly what she did. And she takes this show on the road to libraries and school districts, and she is in awe of how the children sit in a circle and listen to her and look at the illustrations and appreciate the art of storytelling, right? Which is something that may or may not have gone by the wayside. So, of course, I said to her, that's because you never forget the bridge that brought you over, which, of course, we mean the Brooklyn Bridge. But, of course, it's a metaphor for the bridge that connects you to the next level of your life and your experiences. And, of course, what you transition into. She becomes a wife, a mother of 3, and continues to write books and share her art of storytelling with many, many children throughout Nassau and Suffolk counties. Maria's inspiration is really a story born of the fact that she was expected as a young girl to help with the meal, share in the listening, and no one was distracted from what the elders were sharing on that day because there was no technology to distract them, and there was no outside while you were eating the meal. And if you were lucky, you got to go outside and ride your bicycle or continue to sit on the stoop and listen to more stories. What, of course, her uncle shared with her many, many times was his incredible love of baseball. So now I have to bring you back. Before the Los Angeles Dodgers, there was, of course, the Brooklyn Dodgers. And in 1955, they were able to win the World Series almost to the same level of happiness that we just shared over the last weekend with the Knicks. So I thought this would be a perfect segue into what it's like to have this immense pride behind a sports team. So in 1955, when the Dodgers win the World Series, they are led by some of the greats, the names of which you know, Gil Hodges, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, etc. But his favorite player, this is Uncle Frankie's favorite player, was none other than Mr. Carl Furillo. And we're going to dive into a conversation about the pride that Mr. Carl Furillo, a native of Pennsylvania, brought to the borough of Brooklyn in that time period. But I wouldn't want to go down memory lane with anybody other than my next surprise guest, who I called this morning at 9 o'clock and is ready to go in the waiting room. And that is my brother, Mr. Frank Moragello Jr., live from Mansfield, Texas. Welcome, Frank.
Hey, everybody.
Here he is. Okay, there he is. My older brother. Everyone was older than me. But when I called him this morning, I said, I need you to come on the show, because if we're going to talk about Brooklyn and we're going to talk about sauce and we're going to talk about family and the Dodgers and our parents, there's nobody who remembers it better than the two of us, because we were on the tail end of the four. And everything that I was going to have a conversation with Maria about is something Frank and I can certainly relate to. So I'm not going to get into all of the accolades of my very professional, successful brother. That's for a surprise show in the fall when I have my other brother, Dan, on as well. So I'll save that for that show. But I will start with the Queen's Court, which is the conversation we begin every week. And it centers around La Familia, family traditions. So I sent the script to my brother, and here's the conversation we're going to begin with. When we sat around those tables, we looked at the elders and the people who shaped us, and we knew they sacrificed. We're not a family of immigrants. Our grandparents were born in America. We're fourth generation Italian Americans. But the ladies in that room were seamstresses. And the ladies in that room were happy to cook for an entire family and make our beds and to make sure that our pants were hemmed. And the gentlemen in those rooms were people who were not afraid of hard work. And they were very, very much aware of the fact that America was the greatest experience that they would ever have, and that they were happy to be here and raise their families here. And of course, my father, a school teacher, knew that education was the key to the success of all of us around that table. And he emphasized that, and we all went on to college, etc. But talking about that, I thought I would ask my brother this. Tools in the toolkit. What do you think are the top 3 things we learned from those conversations and those examples around those dining room tables? What do you think?
The top 3, there was many. First, shut up and listen is probably the first one. And so much.
Okay. I thought you were saying that to me. Okay. Okay.
Could have been to you too. No, you gotta listen. Whether you're a little guy or an older person, listen to what's going on, understand it, read people that way. Second, whatever you do, you put your name on it. Your pride, your integrity goes to whatever it is you're doing. Don't do it halfway. And then the third one is be proud of who you are and where you came from, and tell everyone else that you can about it and why that's important. Those are probably 3 quick ones, Joan.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's so funny because we did listen. We weren't part of those banters. We were listening and waiting for the punchline and laughing at the jokes. And it was usually at the expense of others, because there was a lot of sarcasm and a lot of ribbing and teasing, which is still part of how we operate today as adults. But I mean, forget the conversations. When you look back as a young boy, what did you see around that table that maybe shaped you as a father? You're the father of 4. What shaped you?
Yeah, to me, Dad was the epitome of what you want to strive to become and do. But the respect was unbelievable. And one of the lines he said, I don't know if you remember this or not, I say it all the time now. He said, every year, and he was ribbing some of the other cooks besides Grandma, who did most of the cooking in our house.
Yeah.
The sauce gets a little weaker around here every year. And I didn't know what he meant then. And I apply it over and over again. And it's about all the things we're talking about, the integrity of what you're doing when nobody's watching you, right? And watch people joke around, kid around, but the love, the food took over different places. It was loud. You know,
It was loud.
my son,
Yes.
one of my son-in-law is from Texas, and his first couple of times he whispered to Melissa, my daughter, "Why does everybody yell?"
We're not yelling.
So now, and you know, and probably many others listening, the table was all connected. Amount of people were there in the basement.
Yes.
We had
Yes.
a table. It was huge.
It was
And
huge.
to the next table, to the next table, to the kids' table.
Right.
You were in sequence order of your rank, if you will. And
Yeah.
so you had to listen. You had a couple different conversations going on at the same time. But the idea was listen to how they got here and what they did really to do it. There was always humor in our house. Humor was
Always.
best tools to get a message across to somebody maybe that didn't want to hear it. I
Always.
do that in many, many ways. So those are the things I remember. It was just great. Everybody had a job. Another quick story, if you want to hear one.
Yeah, I do. That's why you're on.
A buddy of mine that you know well, Ty Borman, who was from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
From the Hick, right? His town was 5,000 people. My high school had more people than his town,
Yes, it did.
PA. And he came over the house for a weekend. And he said to me, it was a Sunday. We're rolling into Sunday by this point. He
Right.
said, when do we eat? And I said, well, after church, we go to church. We'll get the fresh Italian bread. Everybody's got to bring different things over. And my grandmother's been cooking since this morning. In the middle of when we're eating, he said, when do we stop eating?
We never do. Dessert comes after this.
Going, and then you watch the game and you go upstairs and you come back down. And
Yeah.
so those things kept everybody close together. So if something was wrong with anyone in the family, you could see it. They were there. You know, whatever issues, and all families had all kinds of issues.
Sure.
That nucleus of the family taught you, you show up, you're there. And if something's up, it's going to come out before the day was over. And that's how I watched over everybody. It was great.
It was great. And of course, you know, spouses came in and people had to adapt to the table. And, you know, you had to be able to have a thick skin if you were going to survive at that table. But interestingly enough, also, you know, like watching my parents when I was a child, I didn't realize that that was exactly what they had done when they were children. So we would see pictures of my mother with all of her cousins, and everybody lived in the same house on different levels. And, you know, it was always a celebration around food and, you know, a little cold duck. My father thought he was being, you know, very fancy, serving some red champagne that cost $1.50. But, you know, it was all about celebration. And we thought we were the richest people in the world because we had each other. And I know that those are the traditions that you brought with you to Texas. And I know that those are the traditions you keep amongst your 4 children, and that they have turnkeyed to their spouses, right, who are Texas people and don't know from this. There are not many people whose names end in vowels like Morigello, but although we'll give Serrano a good shout out. And I'm sure that the traditions are similar on some levels with some of the Texas habits, but very, very unique and very New York in other ways. But at the core was family, right? And food and dining together and being around each other and talking, right? That was the key.
Of course. And sports was
and sports for us. Yes, for us. I totally agree. What started with baseball fascinations turned strongly into football, which you played both sports for Dad. Well, football certainly. And of course, that's how you learned how to have a conversation with the men in the room, is if you knew some of the sports figures, right? And we're going to get into that shortly when we dive a little bit closer into the book. So here's my second question. When people talk to me out here, right, not foreign land like Texas, about the Brooklyn experience, it very much is synonymous with the Italian-American experience, even though there's so much ethnicity in Brooklyn. You know, we lived in pockets where it was Irish, Catholic, and Jewish people and Italian Americans, and then certain neighborhoods were heavily Puerto Rican or, you know, other cultures, Russians moved in later on. But the Brooklyn experience and the Italian American experience, I think, are synonymous with one another. And I think I'm asking you, how did your heritage as an Italian American shape your life choices?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's things you don't even know you're learning when you learn them, right?
Right.
What we talked about a little bit earlier. But explaining the culture shock was different for me when I went to Pennsylvania. Then I went to over here in Texas, which I love, by the way. Proud that I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My life experiences there were unmatched, but glad I'm here now too. But the re-explaining to people things that they just didn't understand, like I mentioned, Thai, when do we eat? When do we stop eating?
Yeah.
And the answer is you don't, and you just start around lunchtime, I guess, after church. And then I go back to sports because I'm very sports oriented. But you mentioned the Knicks, right? So people are hanging flags out here because the other team was from San Antonio, Texas.
Boo.
and the Dallas Cowboys, right? So
yeah,
would recognize a possible Brooklyn accent out of my voice. And
yeah, you still do have a little bit of that sound. You do.
Well, here they spot it right away. And when I first got here, they would say, "Oh, a Yankee." I'm like, "A Yankee? I don't even like the Yankees." So I would roll it that way into humor. But the things, Joan, it's just you gotta know where you're coming from, what you're gonna do, your opportunity and challenge to work hard and to give back whenever you can. And don't be somebody that brags about anything. You let other people
humble
see what you're doing and praise you. So that was helped my career path from the bottom literally up. Through and I try to push that towards my team and my players, my family.
Right.
And family is probably the most important thing. And you had extended families. Remember, we had uncles and aunts that weren't blood related. Years.
Yeah, they were our parents' best friends, and they were our godparents, and they trusted each other implicitly, and they went on vacations all the time, and and we loved them, and we didn't know any better. What's so interesting, the way you're responding to the questions, which just made me think about something. Going to Texas as an Italian American probably went with a lot of stereotypical thoughts, right, of how you were going to behave and how you probably did business. Very successful businessman with American Airlines for years. But this I've debated with students over the years constantly. The media has always portrayed Italian Americans as gangsters, right? People who are not faithful to their spouses, not the brightest bunch, lots of them and those. And we've debated it for years that is the quintessential New York Italian American or New Jersey. And not until Everybody Loves Raymond did we see the funny, sarcastic side. The brother was a New York City cop and the mother was always intervening and they had to live across the street from each other. And it's just so interesting to me to ask you, was that the perception people had of you, the first negative one?
Of course.
Of course, right?
Right. And our grandfather, Dan Morgello, who was a NYPD detective, he was so hell-bent on making sure everyone didn't think of us that way. Right. And all the bad guys, he broke records on arresting people that were exactly that stereotype and demeaning, pushing the Italian representation under the rug and in a bad way.
Right.
So that goes on all the time. And it's kind of funny. If we did that with another nationality, some people would get very upset quickly.
Absolutely.
We would just take it, move on, and then take it to your advantage. Going around the countryside, coming from Texas, people would think I was going to be Texan coming from where I worked. And then I'm a New York Italian guy, which actually you could play it both ways a couple of different times.
Sure.
Through that. But you're smart enough to be self-aware, and you're smart enough to make sure you prove yourself over it and over again, and at every at-bat, if you will, to use a sports.
Yeah, I love that, at-bat, which is a great transition for us to get to the next question. So when I spoke with Maria, and throughout the pages of her book, she said that her uncle's favorite baseball player was Carl Furillo. And that was my mom's favorite player on the Brooklyn Dodgers as well. So if we could put up a real picture of Carl Furillo so that our viewers could see this gentleman. Yeah, he was called the Reading Rifle, and I thought it was so cute when I said to Maria, I bet you're seeing that and thinking his title was the Reading Rifle. because you're a reading specialist, but
Reading
it's because, right, he was from outside of Reading, Pennsylvania. So there's Mr. Carl Furillo, never made it to the Hall of Fame, but was always just shy of having statistics that would put him there. But again, an Italian who embodied dem bums, which is what the Dodgers were referred to as. And my mom loved him when everybody really loved Gil Hodges more. Our bowling alley, remember our bowling alley?
Yeah.
And my parents, if you could put up that picture, I just love this picture of my parents. That's them going to Ebbets Field on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, going to a baseball game. Look at how they're dressed.
Yep.
Look at those adorable people. And my mother in her best suit and her shoes, her high-heeled shoes, because she was all 5 feet tall. And my dad, look at the suit he's wearing, a suit and tie. And that's the representation of Italian Americans who came from a stock of workers. Her father was a pharmacist. His father was a New York City police detective. And those two kids, that's probably 1951, because they were married in 51 and they had Anne in 52. Couldn't be happier going to the baseball game dressed like that. And my dad would say during the war years, we're talking the Korean War, which is 50 to 53, if you showed up with old pots and pans, you got in for free because they were melting down the metals, right? For artillery, for bullets.
Yep.
And that is the personification of what the Dodgers meant to the people who lived in the heart of Brooklyn, right? So there they are. Now, Maria's representation in her book, if we could go to the illustration of Mr. Carl Furillo, is the moment when her Uncle Frankie, who waited all day to see if he would come out, you know, the back area where certain kids would wait for autographs. He waited all day for Carl Furillo to come out, and he did. And he signed a little yellow napkin that he had in his pocket because he was able to get, you know, a hot dog and a soda for 25 cents. And Maria listened to this story, and she was upset because he had told it, the whole entire story about how he got tickets and went in and met Carl Furillo. But she had to go get bread, and she had to go get the mozzarella. And she was very, very upset when she came back because he had finished the story. And she said, no, I want to sit on the stoop and listen to you tell it to me individually. So if you could go to the next picture, I love this too. This is the chair he sat on, which we all had, those folding chairs. And he retold the entire story. And she said, I never wanted to say that I doubted him, but she said, where is the autograph? And he went upstairs in his drawer, and he had that little yellow napkin.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And she said this to me, that chair, the red and white stoop. For those of you on Long Island who don't understand what that is, or people in Texas, you know, it's a series of steps, right? Born of, you know, the Dutch, who were the first ones here to colonize the New York area. And we would sit on the stoop for hours and just talk and have conversations and play stoop ball and jacks or whatever. This is how we kept ourselves entertained. And she said that is where her love of storytelling came from. And the whole concept of her sitting there and listening and hanging on every word is what she has tried to, you know, pay it forward when she reads from her book and little children sit at her feet. And she said they're just so captivated by the whole story because it's no technology. It's listen, look at the illustrations and enjoy, right?
That's beautiful. That's great.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Now, what are your memories of what Dad would say about Mr. Carl Furillo? And you have a personal connection, do you not?
Yeah. When I came to Texas with my accent, I play a lot of racquetball, and I'm on the racquetball court, and this older guy, who's probably way younger than I am now,
oh boy,
says, "Hey kid, where the hell are you from?" And I'm like, "This guy's not from here." I said, "I'm from Brooklyn." He goes, "Whereabouts?" You know how someone will drill down to figure out where you're from. Well, it was a guy, Mike Napoli, not the most recent Mike Napoli. Mike Napoli was a Brooklyn Dodger, backed up a guy named Roy Campanella, and he was on the Brooklyn Dodgers for years. God bless him, he passed. He asked me to do his eulogy, which was crazy because he knew all the Dodgers, Lasorda, everybody that was still alive. And I won't tell you exactly what he said because there's profanity in there, but he
Okay.
said,
Clean show.
you in front of Ken and Bobby Aspromani, two other Brooklyn Italian baseball players, you're doing my eulogy. I'm like, Mike, you got to let these guys do it. I mean, they will mess it up. It's you. You got to do it because he trusted me to do it. But the point I'm making is when I came here, here's a guy that I knew wasn't from here. He was with the Fort Worth Cats most of his career in minor leagues.
Okay.
And that's how he made the transition to great state of Texas. And so, it was hard. And in some cases, people thought you were dumb because of your accent, and they thought different things that you mentioned earlier. But you use that to your advantage. And coming out of New York, we move a lot quicker. We think fast. We pivot.
We
like
trust no one.
Yeah, you pivot like you did tonight.
Oh yeah.
And you keep going, and that made it easy pickings for business and pleasure. It was great. It was a great move. I'm glad I did it. But Mike was a Brooklyn Dodger catcher, to your point that you mentioned earlier, and how he related everything to sports. And we stayed together. He was at all the weddings and the funerals until he passed as well. I think you got to meet him even at maybe Melissa's wedding.
I think at Melissa's wedding. And again, I wasn't such a student of, all of the Dodgers. I did my homework for this show because, this is obviously before me, but I knew what they meant to mom and dad. I knew that. And I knew when they left the city, what it meant, right, to the borough, that they were going way out west to Los Angeles. You couldn't get, more of a difference, the dichotomy between LA and New York City. And then slowly the Giants, right, had left the, New York Giant baseball, right? They were up in the Bronx. And it was just, it was a dark time until the Mets came around, right, in 62. And of course the Yankees were always here, but everybody hated the Yankees because they always won. So I thought it was a perfect parallel, being that here in New York, no kidding. Like, we all really felt this energy these last 2 weeks. And I think we came up on the best side of who we are as sports fans. And I think that was because of the gentleman who represented the team. So that's the other parallel. The names, great guys,
young men,
carried themselves beautifully. Right. I mean, even Jackie Robinson, who was up against the worst of humanity, right? Coming up in 1947. A little fact people don't realize is that he came up in 47, which is, and he was in the service, and still the flack, right? The flack was unbearable.
His roommate during baseball game?
Who?
Mike Napoli. Because he was as dark as some of the black people.
Really?
And so good friends all the way through, and he helped them out. And there's guys that came and spoke at his funeral.
Could you get more of a class act, right, than Jackie Robinson, who held himself above the fray every game? Unreal. So that's my point. My point is, sometimes people go, you're all obsessed with sports and it's too much. When it's the right people representing the sport and you rally around them, which I guess people are feeling that way right now about USA Soccer, because it's been a while since they won 2 games. That's what I'm saying. On home field, home court. And I'm pretty sure Messi is Italian. I'm just going to throw that out here. All right. Argentina. I know he is. So I'm just going to say that when it's the right people, because he also holds himself beautifully.
Yes.
Never, big headed, and, never lets the game get too big for him. I think he's scored every goal that Argentina has scored so far.
You're hitting on a point that I think you highlighted, but I'm going to stop and say it again anyway.
Go ahead.
You treat your teammates like family, literally, you win. You win more games.
Right.
Good thing.
Right.
You protect each other. You care about each other. So that's a real important thing. And that's what was ingrained in us.
Yes, certainly.
And I'm passing that on to the second and third generations of our families, right?
Right. More Jellos in Texas than you would think, right?
There's a bunch.
There's a bunch, and they're all athletes. And Luke would say, my son Luke would say the same thing when he was at Maritime. There was a love, there was a respect, there was a common decency amongst all of them, and that's why they did well, right? And you try to find that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that is the glue. right? That's the glue that we're saying makes the sport valuable. All right, here's our third question. I'm just going to keep going because I don't think we need a commercial break, because I feel like we could do this all day and I like it. So I'm not breaking for commercials, Bobby. That's how it goes. So here's my third question. The stoop, which I alluded to earlier, was a gathering spot.
Yeah.
Right. We agree to that. I mean, probably more for me than you guys, because you were always running to sports programs. I would sit on the stoop with my girlfriends all summer, all day, jacks and all those other like crazy, ridiculous sports that we played in the street, Red Rover and the little, what was that thing where you put it on your ankle and you swung it around and you jumped over it, footsie, whatever that was. We would do these things for hours. And there was like 10 girls on the block, right? Because, you know, it's Brooklyn. Everybody's house is really close to each other. And our neighbors were such good friends with us, the Belisarios and the Candellas. And the Panettas, Joe Panetta, shout out. He always watches. So I have to say to you, the love of listening was definitely fostered on the stoop. You listened to each other. Girls told each other their problems. And we talked about, you know, boyfriends and things that we were, you know, growing into. But here's my question. How do you do that today when kids, your own grandchildren, are so geared towards technology and digital and tablets and the phone? And how do you get them back to that core that we grew up with?
Yeah. I think
how do you do that?
really, really hard. And I think it goes back to the saying, the sauce gets a little weaker every generation. Right. So there's more things that will interfere with that. But,
yeah,
you know, my kids raise their kids the way they think they should. Each of them
of course,
own rules of how much time on a device or whatever. Some do, don't. But then it comes back, I think, to me and Linda as the grandparents, if you will, to try and set the tone and get some quiet 1-on-2 time. I have 8 grandkids, right? So it's hard to even get them alone. But when you do, you can make an impact.
Sure.
Stop and do different things and listen to them too. I mean, they, you know, their attention span is really, really short because of all the distractions they have.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to do that. But you know, one of the things I take each one of the guys so far to a baseball game. They pick a baseball game.
That's lovely.
Just me and them go, and their parents let them come with me, and we go watch the Rangers play whoever they're playing. And get to pick a game, and we go. And it's really unique because they're all different. One guy wants to eat everything in the place. The other guy doesn't want to leave his seat to miss any of the plays. The other guy wants to go shopping in the different place.
That's me.
But different attention, but you're with them, and I hope, you know, you take a picture or two these days. It's easy to do. They will remember that. They will. But
you're also saying the thing that every grandparent needs to understand. You're showing up, right? Our grandparents didn't come to our events. They were old when we were young, but meanwhile, they weren't. You know, we thought they were so old. They lived upstairs. They were old. You know, they were in their 60s. I was young, but they were never coming to anything. They weren't standing on a field in the heat. They weren't coming to dance recitals. Listen, it is what it is. But we envision them as being old, right? And now we're of a certain age, but you show up for gymnastics for Olivia, same way you show up for baseball for Kyle. And you're going to see Kate cheerleading, the things that you tortured me about, right? These aren't real sports. Now you're seeing another side of life because you have little granddaughters, right? And it's an amazing, amazing thing. But I think what I'm trying to say to you is there may not be a physical structure like a stoop, but you're showing up. Right. And that's the quiet time, and that's the distraction free zone that you're hoping to achieve with your grandchildren. And I'm going to say, when they look back, and of course, everybody has photos now, you probably have 50 on your phone, right? I do too, of every moment that you experienced with them. And that's just a beautiful thing, because, you know, when we pass, it's going to be hard to make those collages. We don't have a lot of pictures when we were babies. I was looking all day for a picture of you and I got 2 maybe. And I don't really have pictures of me and mom. Like the last baby.
You had to bring
There
light
were cameras. There
in
were
the store.
cameras because you know that there were
Alan,
glossy photos of Dan and Ann. There certainly were. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it's such a different dimension now that everything is captured, right? And we'll be able to look back and appreciate that.
yeah.
So, okay, that's good. All right, so we're up to the point of the show called the Tiara Tip of the Week. And this is the giving back portion.
Right.
What I didn't say about Maria is, other than giving back with the publication of her book, she's also writing another book called Sometimes. Very, very soft and poignant because it's from the viewpoint of her grandchildren watching her husband, who passed from Alzheimer's, not really remembering everything all of the time. And so the lens that she's writing this next book about is called Sometimes, about watching their grandpa not remember things. She has turnkeyed that into being a board member for the Alzheimer's Association of Long Island. Much appreciation. And she's also a Rotarian. When she first told me that, I said, "Are you a member of the Rosary Club?" She said, "No, Rotary." I said, "Oh, okay." So she's also very involved in the Interact program in West Babylon, and she resides in West Babylon on the water, and she's constantly giving back. So I thought, you are now, and we're retired from our professions, still active, physically and doing things in that nature. And of course, you're still very much involved in your children's lives and your grandchildren's lives. But the question is, what encourages you to continue to give back to the community for maybe service or for youth or for research? Like, what encourages you to keep that going?
Well, they're going to miss out if you don't share what you've got, right? So the experiences about and everything else, you may not know this. I have something called the Golden Ticket, which is given to me from the Major League Baseball Association.
I don't know this.
Okay. Yeah. I don't talk about it a lot. And it was for community service for over 30 years. That's when I was in a prominent position and able to help kids in inner cities play baseball.
In Texas.
All over the world.
All over the world.
Good, mostly U.S. And what it is, you get the first guy to ever get this was President Roosevelt. Got it.
Franklin, not Teddy. Franklin Roosevelt. 40s, probably 45.
Yeah, Franklin.
Yeah, okay.
Miss History teacher, I knew you would correct.
Well, I have to know.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's the Golden Ticket. It allows you to go to Major League Baseball games anywhere for yourself and a guest as a courtesy.
Very nice.
And so that was a community service, and that was my sports background, saying I want to do something so that you get a shot at doing it. So I do now with these little guys. I coached Pee Wee football when my guys were around, which was the hardest job I ever had in my life in Texas. Pee Wee football, underage.
Religion. It's religion.
40-man roster. We're doing anyway. So nobody got hurt. Everybody had fun. We won a couple of games, but right now I try as I'm able to or invited to, I get involved with the grandkids where I can. At one point, I wound up coaching Olivia and her Olympic gymnastic team who wanted to play flag football.
Flag football, yes.
So do something. So I had them for the first 2 or 3 practices. And it was funny and great. And I'll never forget it. I told all the girls, get in your position. Here's your position. I had Kyle on the other side. I said, all right, Kyle, we're going to move the ball. Ready? Go. You know what they did? They all stayed in their position.
You told them to. Girls listen very, very well.
Coachable. By the end of the year, they were playing great. So those type of things is what I do.
That's it. That's the message.
I'm on a couple of boards that I talk at TCU once in a while, and one of the schools at Bauer in Houston, where I'll come back and talk to them about some of my business stuff and experience that I've had.
And tell us about, in closing, your Italian American Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
Tell us that.
National Italian American Foundation. It's the largest organization in the country. There's like 40 million and growing Italian Americans in the U.S. And the whole idea there is to stop some of that
stereotyping and narrative. Right.
All that garbage. Keep the relations between the U.S. and Italy strong.
Yep.
We have a black tie event that's the largest in the whole country in Washington, D.C. once a year. And a bunch of that we do that we give back, scholarships, everything else.
Love that. So that's my brother. That's my pivot. That's Mr. Frank Morigello coming through for me, because if we could talk about Brooklyn, we could go on and on. But I think what you heard from the both of us is at the core is family, right? And the unity and the openness and the conversations, because that's what this book personified for Maria, and the parallels that we made tonight between my brother and myself. Same thing, on the same tandem line. So I appreciate you pivoting with me, because I was a little stressed this morning, shall I say. But I want also for you to understand that I don't stop with the sports connections, because my next guest in the month of July, which will be on July the 14th, which happens to be Bastille Day, and I'll tie that in a minute, which is French Independence Day, will obviously be after we have a grand celebration for 250 years of independence on the 4th of July, which is also my wedding anniversary. I mean, you just can't get more parallels. So I say to you, please join me on the July 14th episode, when I welcome this 5-time U.S. Paralympian, Mr. Steve Serio, who was, of course, a student of mine. Not only was he a 5-time Paralympian, he is a 3-time gold medalist in wheelchair basketball. And that is a picture of him when he was the flag bearer in Paris. I told you Bastille Day would come back in 2024, when he was voted by his fellow athletes to be the flag bearer, wearing his Ralph Lauren jacket. And the entire town of Carle Place went incredibly crazy with pride, because this young man, who was in my class in the early 2000s, was denied any offers within the high school to play in any sports capabilities, because he wasn't able-bodied. You know, Steve had a large tumor on his spine when he was an 11-month-old, and that debilitated him for the rest of his life. But he would walk the halls with arm braces, and at the end of the day, he was exhausted. And I think he transitioned into the wheelchair and found out about a local wheelchair basketball program in Garden City. And I remember taking my children, who were probably 7 or 8 years old, to watch him play wheelchair basketball. And we were amazed at the tenacity of these athletes and their abilities. And from that, Steve, who was in my AP classes, brilliant young man, was given the opportunity, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, to go to the University of Illinois at Urbana on a full ride to play wheelchair basketball, where he excelled and took them to a national championship. From there, he went on to play for the Team USA, the national team. And as I said, was in 5 Olympics, 3 garnering gold medals.
Wow.
In 2017, the list goes on, the ESPYs, which is ESPN's Oscars, voted him the best male athlete with a disability. And this young man continues to come back to Carle Place and talk to young athletes. Right now, he's in Armenia, which was hard for me to get even this bio from him. And we keep in touch, because it just wasn't coming through. And he's in Armenia teaching young athletes there about their abilities in wheelchair basketball. And Steve is just, forget it, the inspiration that we all need to see. And he is willing to come here on July the 14th for my podcast, because he thinks this is just the coolest thing, that his former history teacher is now on a podcast. And I will say to all of you who should tune in on July the 14th, let me just say something very, very openly. Steve never, ever let his disability stop him. And he was so inspiring to everyone in his class that there were times we would go on field trips in New York City, and he couldn't go because there were no capabilities to get his wheelchair onto a train or onto a bus, and the entire school district had to change their ramps. They had to put in an elevator, like things that you don't think about. And it's not that Steve went to the Board of Education and his parents demanded that these things take place. It's as a result of his tenacity and his abilities to say, hey, you know, there are things we're being left out of and maybe we shouldn't be. So I cannot wait for that show on the July 14th episode. He may have to zoom in because, you know, he's coming back from Eastern Europe and, you know, things happen, delays. Look, things happen today. But either way, we have a firm appointment, and we continue to be in awe of his capabilities. And I can't wait for you all to see him speak. He's such an inspirational, positive speaker. So we continue with the theme of sports, Frank. It's who we are. It's how we were groomed. So until we meet again, let's show up and show out for the 4th of July and celebrate our independence of 250 years, you know, the experiment that everyone thought would fall apart within the first 5. So here we are 250 years later, enjoying this amazing country. And God bless the United States of America. And thank you so much, my brother. I appreciate you. And have a good evening, everyone. Love to everyone in Texas, Frank, Linda, and everyone in the family. Love. Okay. Thank you and good evening.
That'll be great.
Yep.